I'm Andrew Ross Sorkin. As we conclude today's forum, we want to have a conversation and try to look towards the future. And we want to do that with some bright young leaders who are planning and ushering in a very new era, and try to talk about the inclusion efforts at their organizations and what we can learn from them. Joining us this afternoon is Ryan Williams, co-founder and CEO of Cadre, a real estate and technology company. Jason Wright, president, of course, of the Washington football team, is with us. And Morgan DeBaun, founder and CEO of Blavity, the largest network of platforms and lifestyle brands serving black audiences. Thank you all for joining this afternoon. I want to start with you, Morgan. You have a remarkable story. You launched your company 6 years ago, and you are one of the first of 15 American women to raise $1 million in venture funding or more. And I wanted to ask you, as someone who's leading a company and is now also an angel investor, what you think needs to be done to make capital more accessible, given that that seems to be such a key to this challenging issue.
Yeah, well, one, thank you for having me. You know, when it comes to raising money, I think it's an incredible feat at all to be able to raise and convince people at the early stages of your business to give you $1 million or more. In the past 6 years, I think the community within Silicon Valley and within our industry has made significant strides, but there's a lot of work to do. So in terms of increasing access to capital, one, I think for the venture capitalists who may be watching this and who are considering diversifying their portfolio, you have to remember that a lot of young black founders, we tend to look a little bit different than your typical pattern. And in Silicon Valley, people often engage in pattern matching. So myself, I'm from the Midwest. I don't have a technical degree. I didn't go to Stanford, and this is my first company, so it's a first-time founder. My pitches may have sound differently. So I think one is just understanding that own bias for wanting to match a pattern that you're used to seeing, and realizing and accepting that you may be a little uncomfortable, but this is actually how innovation is made, is when you go outside of the immediate opportunity and you really think about, wow, maybe because this young person is standing in front of me, despite the odds, this is a bet that I want to make. So that's my first suggestion. And then two, for those black founders and entrepreneurs who are considering venture funding, I think really in making sure that they feel and they know that this is your time. There's never been a better time to raise money for your company. Everyone is looking to have diverse companies, portfolios, and to make sure that they're actually targeting diverse audiences as well when it comes to the market opportunity of the future of this country. So this is your time to shine, so go get after it.
Ryan, I want to ask you, you are disrupting the real estate industry, technology as well, but the real estate industry has long been an old boys network and dare I say, a very white industry. What led you to want to get into the business, given the issues we're talking about, modeling and everything else? And you've, by the way, become a great role model for so many in the African-American community now in real estate. But what led you to it?
Yeah, it's a good question, Andrew, and appreciate you having me on. Look, I know firsthand what access to financial investments like real estate can do for somebody's future. You know, I grew up working class. Nobody in my family had been involved with real estate, let alone tech and real estate. And I was fortunate to have people that believed in me and had some ways even greater expectations for myself than I did at the time, and said, you know, think outside the box. One of the people being a guy I know you know well named Ray McGuire, who really took me under his wing my freshman year in college when I came in a little bit lost. And Ray was one of the people that said, you know, why not financial services? Why not real estate? Look what I've been able to do. And the more time I spent in real estate, including starting my own business, buying homes in Atlanta in 0809, one of the last sort of credit crisis that we had, I saw just how much wealth was being created. I saw what ownership of real estate could do for people's futures, how it literally could create stability. It could give people a fallback plan. Real estate's one of the most important asset classes to own to build that kind of wealth. But I also saw that in the black community and in lower income communities, there was a lack of real estate ownership. And so I set out to change that dynamic. You know, I want to democratize the ability for people to build long-term wealth. And I've never been shy about the fact that it's going to be a challenging undertaking, that I look different. But I think it was that unconventional approach and my unconventional outlook that actually let me, in many ways, beat the odds. And now I think as a result, more people are able to invest in real estate. And to Morgan's point, I think one of the bigger implications that's positive is more people see role models that look different, to your point. And I think that's going to create a cycle, the same way someone like Ray McGuire looked out for me and said, try to get into financial services, try to get into real estate. You're going to have to work 3, 4, 5 times as hard to succeed. I hope my example can catalyze that next generation, and I am optimistic about that, just given everything that we've seen to date.
It's an inspiring story. I want to talk a little bit more about it in just a moment, but I want to get to Jason. You are now the NFL's first black team president, and I should also say the youngest at age 38. Of course, you're working inside an organization that's trying to change the culture, the name, facing incredible challenges given the pandemic. I'm just curious what it's been like, and specifically culturally inside when it comes to the issue of diversity, what it's been like and the conversations you're having.
Yeah, thanks for having me, y'all. I'd have to say, if I had to characterize, where we're at, we're going to have to put our money where our mouth is around inclusion and diversity, and creating, a workplace that empowers, inspires, gives voice to everybody in the way that it needs to. And so, we are actually able to walk the walk in this moment. And even though it's been a bit of a tumult the last couple of weeks, it's been a time where I and my leadership team have been able to actually demonstrate how we're going to do things differently, enact policies right off the rip that create a more empowered, open and inclusive environment for women in particular, but that trickles down to everybody else as well. And so, it's a great moment to do that, as well as take a moment to think about how we build our leadership team going forward, because, and I think people have touched on this isn't just a moral imperative, it's a business imperative. Because if we have more diverse leadership teams, we make better decisions and we expand the value of our enterprises more rapidly. And that's what I'm here to do. And so it's absolutely something that we have to prioritize, both because of what the pressure that we are under in this moment, and I welcome it, along with our long-term strategic goals.
So take us, though, inside some of the conversations, because I have to imagine there have been challenging conversations. I can't imagine that everybody has bought in fully on moment one, that you have not had to persuade people down the field.
You'd be surprised, because a lot of people have worked in an environment where they felt muted for a long time. People are eager for change, and that also includes leadership. So, for example, one of the immediate things that I did even before I started was, look, how do we build a robust HR infrastructure and have the right employee relations processes that allow people to give voice and surface the type of leadership that doesn't align with our values. Our ownership was on board, said, boom, do it, pay what it takes. Our leadership was on board, said, go for it, we're in and we're on board. I haven't met a single hindrance yet. Maybe I haven't bumped up on it yet, right? I've only been here 2.5 weeks. But I think there's a hunger for change here, and no debate so far.
I want to go back, if I could, to Morgan and try to understand, what does it look like inside your company? And maybe Ryan can speak to this as well in terms of the diversity mix, because one of the things we always talk about is if we can get enough diversity at the top, it will have a trickle-down effect. What's the mix look like?
Yeah, at Blavity, I'm empowered enough to be lucky to have a majority black and majority woman-led company when it comes to our directors and above at the company, and all the way through. And I think that's really empowered me and the rest of the executive team to bring our full selves to the business, to really focus on how we can be a space, a platform, and a partner with other companies that want to have more inclusion and diversity. We've been able to, show up fully every single day in our own offices. And if there's challenges, we have an open dialogue and an open door policy to be able to work through things. I've certainly learned a lot in the last 6 years about myself and even the biases that I was raised with and the privileges that I've had growing up.
Ryan, I'm curious about fundraising in this environment, because a lot of this is about a network. It's about trying to create the right network and being able to find the right people. And I think that's been one of the great challenges as well. Those of us, including myself, and I have been privileged, very, very privileged, white privilege, and had access to various networks that I know so many people in the black community and my black friends haven't had. And so my question is, how do you think we can fix that?
Yeah, it's a great point, and I think it's one of the elephants in every room. It's that social capital. It's the closed-end dynamics, associated with a lot of these networks. And I will say I've been encouraged by the number of white VCs, investors, leaders that have reached out to me, acknowledging that a lot don't even know where to get started. And what I say is that, action is a lot better than inaction, and it's okay to get connected to connectors. So, you might not be able to get directly to that pool of black board members that you're looking for, or female board members that you're looking for, but I'm sure you know somebody who does have that network. And I think that what people can do is move forward, push the ball forward, get connected to networks. And now there's even more organizations that have been created and formulated, as effectively, beacons of social capital that more people now than ever can tap into. But I do think that it's important to get connected, and it can't just be about, we want to help with advice or guidance. There's got to be investment. There's got to be commitment. I've been fortunate in many ways to have people who believed and invested in me, but it wasn't easy. And I don't know how many people said no because I am African American. I don't know how many people said no because I was, a younger founder getting into two pretty stodgy Jurassic industries. But I do know that I've had to do a lot more explaining of who I am and what I'm about. And I'm hopeful, as Morgan had highlighted as well, that we start thinking differently about diversity. We start thinking about the competitive advantages it affords to have more perspectives at the table, because it's not just an imperative. It also allows you to ensure you don't miss your own blind spots as an organization right. and as leaders. And so I guess my biggest
Ryan,
piece of advice is if you don't know where to get started, get connected to connectors.
What's your board look like and the diversity inside your company right now?
Yeah, so our management team, our leadership team, and I'm really pleased about this. It's more than 50% people of color or women. And of course, we want to do better, and we know that we need to do more across the entire organization. We have a relatively small board, and so because I am on the board, I represent more than a quarter of our board as African American. But as we grow our board, one of the key areas of focus for us is diversity across other dimensions. We don't have any women members of the board, which we're going to change. Again, we're still a few people on our board today, but we've started with our executive management team and making sure that in those positions of influence and governance and power, we have multiple perspectives at the table. And I would just call out that by default, Cadre is a pretty diverse organization because we're bringing together people from the real estate space and people from the technology space. And we're bringing people who are kind of a little bit outside of the institutional norms. And so that's been baked into our culture from day one, is that we're going to have to look at things differently, and our team has to reflect that, as well as reflect the diversity of the client base that we're looking to serve over time.
I imagine all three of you are getting calls. Your phone, I imagine, might even be ringing off the hook, given the particular moment we're in and the number of public and private companies that, frankly, I think in good faith want to diversify their boards. And so I imagine you're getting these calls. What are you thinking when you get these calls? Because I've heard both very positive things about this, people who say we should be taking advantage of this moment. I hear other things from other people who say that they feel like they're being considered tokens. And I think there's more complexity to it than it necessarily appears on the surface. I'll make that a jump ball for all three of you who may want to jump in on that.
Yeah,
I'm happy
I'll jump
to.
in. You know, I
Go
think
ahead, Morgan, please.
For Blavity, we work, our core business is advertising with Fortune 100 companies who want to reach the black consumer. And so we've been having these conversations with people now for years, but the conversation I think now has shifted from being at the middle manager level to the executive level. And so what we're seeing is that this has really opened the door for your directors and your middle managers who have been saying things for years and years to actually have the ear of those executives, C-level executives and board members, and that's resulting in bigger suggestions, campaigns, programs. Now, it's a multi-year, needs to be a multi-year commitment, right? It can't just be in 2020. This needs to be 5-year, 10-year commitment because, as we've talked about a lot, this is good for business. Diversity is good for business. And so while the conversations, the phone has been ringing quite a bit, I assume best intent. And I really challenge the executives and the C-level folks that I talk to on a regular basis to really not just tune in this moment, to make sure that there's regular checkpoints all the way through the business from the top all the way down so things don't get lost in the trickle down, because I think that's where the biggest risk for execution risk is in the future.
Yeah, I'll build on what Morgan was saying by, if I were at home talking to y'all, I would say get in where you fit in. I'm not as caught up on the motives, whether someone is, looking for a token position, et cetera. If you're going to bring in an accomplished black, brown, woman, LGBTQ plus professional onto your board, I'm not going to get caught up in the motive, but I am, as an individual of color or whatever aspects of my identity I'm bringing to the table, I'm going to communicate to that leadership team how I am going to be and how I expect my identity to show up in the way that I give voice to issues in the boardroom, in the way that I bring my thinking to the problems that the business is facing. In other words, I'm going to be unapologetically black if I am on your board. So I actually don't mind about your motives, but you know what you're going to get if you bring me on. And I think then the partnership can work incredibly well.
Ryan, I heard from a little birdie that you were offered a board position recently and you turned it down.
Yeah, I've been fortunate to be contacted by a few folks about different board opportunities, and I think that number one, my focus is Cadre and executing on our mission of democratizing access to real estate. I'm also very focused on a couple of new products we have on the horizon that will be focused on not just delivering greater access, but driving positive societal change. And I don't want anything at this point in time to take away from that focus. But what's interesting is that in a couple of the cases where I've been contacted about board opportunities, while I turned them down just given my focus right now, I actually was able to connect, in both cases, those individuals to two other African Americans that I frankly thought could be even better qualified than me that weren't in those networks. And so that gets back to that point. And even if you don't know exactly how to tap directly into the pools of talent, there's someone who does. And I'm sure that in this digital world where connections are easier than ever, people can be resourceful and get connected in a way that's effective. But yeah, for me right now, Andrew, it's been just heads down focus on executing. We have a lot going on in the world right now, and I want to use my platform and Cadre's platform to help drive positive change. And as board opportunities down the line present themselves, I'll assess. But right now, Cadre is the number one focus.
Fair enough. I got a couple more questions, and we're going to run out of time. And this conversation can go on for a very long time because I have so many questions. But Jason, I wanted to ask you about private sector versus public sector, in particular education. And the reason I ask it is so far our conversation's all been about what the private sector can do. But I think there's a large piece of this that ultimately is also going to be a partnership, if you will, with the public sector. And I think education is going to be a big element. If you could change the education system today, in particular around this issue of diversity, what would you do?
Wow, you just gave me a powerful magic wand right there. I'll defer to the expertise of some of my former clients in higher ed. And the way that I think higher ed has both led the way and has an opportunity to do even more on diversity and inclusion is to do it in an integrated fashion. I think institutions have done great with their student bodies. They have been able to find a way to find talent in pockets where it wasn't before. And programs that people may decry politically have actually worked quite well for institutions to build a student body that creates a robust academic experience through the lens of diversity. But it hasn't materialized into tenured professors. There's a gap there. And it hasn't flowed its way through curriculum. And I think the institutions and thinkers that are doing this best are saying diversity should be just how we do business across everything in an educational institution. There should be a lens through various different aspects of identity on the curriculum that students are learning. And there should be representative presence, not only in the student body, but in the faculty that are teaching them. In fact, in K through 12, there's a study, it's many years old now, but it says if you're a black student and you have a black teacher for even just one of your years in elementary school, you're something like 3 times more likely to go to college, something ridiculous like that. So there's a need to have role models and representation and instruction as well. And I think institutions, no matter what level, are thinking about it in an integrated fashion are the ones that are going to get it right and are going to get the outcomes that we want to see.
Okay, final question. This one is for all three of you, and I'll start back with Morgan since we began this conversation together at the outset. If we all got back together in 10 years from now, and we sat together, hopefully in person, by the way, rather than doing this in the remote fashion that we are during this pandemic, what do you think the realistic goals should be and can be? What should we be aspiring for? And what do you think is, and how far do you think we will get?
Wow, Andrew, what a great question. Let's see, in 10 years from now, my hope and vision and dream would be that we have accelerated so quickly that people would look back on our story, or even the intro that you said where, I've raised $1 million and one of the number can be counted of black women who've raised a significant amount of money, that people would say, oh, that's so funny. Like, how odd were those people back then? That we would seem, our accomplishments would seem like everyday achievements that are not worthy of news. That would be the dream for me, that we've really pushed forward fast enough.
Jason, what do you think?
It is a hard question, and I think I can't say it much better than Morgan. Maybe I'll give just a quick insight on, I think, the things we can do to get there more quickly. I think we all need to think hard about how we tie the incentives that matter for individuals and organizations to those outcomes. Organizations that have moved the needle on this most swiftly and with the best effect are those that have said, hey, our leaders are going to be assessed on how they cultivate the pipeline of diverse talent coming through the company. And so I'd love to see that become the norm. However you reward within your organization performance, because this is a business imperative, we should reward those leaders who are the best at promoting and developing Black, Brown, Latinx women talent across our organizations. And I would love to see practices like that seem so bold today become a par for the course.
Can I just follow up on that? And I'm curious, in a very specific way about the goal. When I say the goal, some people believe that a company or an organization's diversity should be reflective of the community with which it exists. So, we could look at the diversity demographics in a city like New York or Washington or what have you, and that's the way an organization should look. Others think it should be beyond that. Others think it should be less. But so I'm curious there. But I'm also curious about the incentive, because the incentive is a very interesting one. Insofar as there are a number of big public companies now, Microsoft and Uber, that actually are providing compensation. They part of your bonus, in large part, if you're in the hiring business, is based on diversity goals. Do you think that's right? Because I'll also tell you, I've gotten people who have sent me emails during Squawk Box in the morning saying, Andrew, you're advocating for reverse discrimination.
I mean, I'll touch on it since I was just advocating for something like this. I'll say this. If you believe, as I do, that talent is equally distributed across all people of all types, then if you don't see representation that it's equivalent to, pick your metric, population, whatever it is, talent, available talent pool, blah, 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 something is wrong. And there's no reverse anything. There are just objective barriers that exist, seen or unseen, if we are not seeing opportunities equally distributed, if we believe that talent is equally distributed. And if someone were to argue that talent is not equally distributed, that's a whole different question that's a lot more challenging to address.
Right. I agree with you 100%. Finally, Ryan, what do you think the real estate and technology worlds are going to look like in 10 years? Because, I'd say technology in particular has said a lot about how much they want to try, but when you look at the numbers, it has been slow would maybe be the polite word to use.
Yeah. Your first question about coming back 10 years from now and the kind of progress and we would like to see and what I see as success, I think it's really about economic equity. At the end of the day, one thing that I saw firsthand in 08-09 was the absolute devastation that subprime credit crisis had on communities across the country, but in particular, black and brown communities. And they were just beginning, our communities were just beginning in many ways to recover, and COVID and the pandemic have set a lot of those communities back. And I think the big concern I have is, as we look forward, are we really going to be able to narrow this economic gap? I think the opportunity today, to be clear, is businesses have to realize that unless they're intentional about investing in communities, increasing diversity, democratizing access to economic opportunity, what's just happened and what's just been surfaced for so many people will rear its ugly head again. And I think in real estate and technology, those are two industries where real estate, one of the best ways to create long-term generational wealth, it's been pretty homogenous. Tech, one of the best ways to create pretty quick long-term multi-generational wealth. And I think they have to be held accountable. And that starts across the organization. We've got to operationalize diversity metrics. And, there should be KPIs and a scorecard, and it shouldn't be something that people question 10 years from now as a true business advantage. And so that's my hope in both those industries. It's my hope broadly. And I think this is an opportunity, again, for people to take a different perspective on what all of our responsibilities are, for the collective society.
Right. Ryan, Jason, Morgan, I want to thank all three of you. This is the end of this conversation, but I hope it really is just the beginning. I look forward to watching your progress and success, and I really do hope we can have this conversation 10 years from now, and a couple maybe in between, about what this world really looks like and hopefully where it's going to look like. So thank you. I'm going to send it back to Sharon and John.
Thank you.